My name is Ben Cutler, one of our solution specialists here at WinPeer. This is going to be an informal webinar. Encourage questions along the way. You'll see the question box on the GoToWebinar control panel. And we host these weekly webinars, hopefully to help people become more familiar with our software. Provide some additional training, tips, best practices, things like that. Occasionally covering some very specific use cases. So again, today looking very specifically at name matching or people type of matching. Worth noting is that everyone on the call is still going to be muted, but again, there is a question box on the GoToWebinar control panel. Hopefully everybody can find that. Feel free to submit questions along the way. Following this webinar today, everyone will receive an email from me with a link to the recording and a link to my online calendar. Feel free to set up some time if you have some additional questions. If you'd like to schedule a one-on-one, feel free to respond to the email if you have one-off questions or suggestions for these webinars and future topics, things like that. So I know a lot of people are joining us from home today. Obviously we're all making a ton of adjustments. We're seeing huge shifts in in markets, trends, a lot of uncertainty. So hopefully we can kind of all pull away from that for the next 30 minutes or so and think about data matching. Hopefully this will be useful to everyone in the call. I don't know, working from home now, is anyone else fighting with their cat or their kids over who owns the keyboard and the computer? Obviously lots of big changes taking place. Again, one of the reasons why we're keeping this very informal. Everybody is really working from home at this point, so really appreciate everyone joining. If you want to chime in and let me know where you're joining from, what city you're joining from, what part of the world you're joining from, would love to hear from you. So the structure of the webinar today. A little bit of company information. We're going to skip the slides. We're going to little bit of information just about the problems that we typically help to solve. 2-minute quick overview of the software for anyone that might be new to the software, and then we're going to look at a couple of different examples of name matching, right? Of people matching. So the company, for those of you who might be new to WinPeer. The company was founded in 2003. We've been doing data quality solutions and data matching for almost 20 years now. Our Clean and Match software, which you can see on the screen here, this is award-winning software on G2 Crowd. Tons of really positive, great feedback from our clients over the years. We really appreciate that. The software is plug and play. It's built for business users. You don't need any special skills. 2 minutes to download, 2 minutes to install. We have a free trial available, so feel free to go on the website winpeer.com and request that free trial. The agenda, the format today, again, we're going to start with a quick mention of some of the problems, move into just a quick overview, and then look at a few specific examples here. So the types of problems that we help to solve and the different use cases that we see, we're often talking about deduplication, very common use case there. Also data integration or data migration, those larger initiatives that require, quite a bit of data cleanup and merging of, multiple different, disparate data sets from different areas of business, also for master data management. A lot of the times we're talking about merge purge use cases, single customer view, single source of truth, 360 customer view, data prep, address verification, real-time and batch address verification solutions, postal certification, email verification, and more. I mean, these are a variety of different ways that we could potentially help you. So again, today we're going to be looking very specifically at the name matching people data. But along the way, feel free to submit questions about WinPeer as an organization, different solutions available, whatever questions you may have. Want to keep it interactive so it's useful for everyone. So if you're looking at the screen here, you can see the software. So you've probably downloaded the software, installed the software. It takes just a couple of minutes to do that, whether it be the free trial or the paid version of the software. It's a very simple workflow. You can see here down in the lower left corner. So the primary workflow is you move from data to clean to match, right? So it's very intuitive, doesn't require much training or any special skills, really just a know-how in terms of what you need to do with the data, right? Lots of different resources available for training purposes. We do these webinars. We've got lots of recorded content on YouTube. Great help file, online help file there, going into some examples and things like that. So typically doesn't require more than an hour or two of kind of assisted learning, so to speak. So we're going to move from data to clean to match. We also have a verify for address verification, and the Enterprise Edition has that automation unit. We're not going to talk about that too much today unless questions come up. Today we're going to look mostly at the data, the clean, and the match steps. From the data step, you're mostly just importing data, which we can do from a variety of different sources. And all of this is out of the box, so it should be very, very simple. Again, a few minutes to download and install, and you can start working with data very quickly here. So from data, you can see up top the secondary workflow, which is project, import, and export. We can also create projects, export data, but primarily what you're going to do here is import data, which if you see over to the right here, you can do from different sources. We can import data from different file types and mix and match these file types for list matching and things like that. We can also import data from databases, a variety of different databases, and from a couple of different CRMs. Now keep in mind all of this is out of the box, so there really isn't any additional like build out that has to be done, right? You're gonna download and install the software and you can start importing data pretty quickly and pretty easily. So that's the import step. That's the data step, right? Data and import, right? So not a lot of learning at this step here, right? This is just a general overview for those who might be new to the software. Then we're going to start looking at some examples. The clean step here, you've got 4 windows on your screen when you move to the clean step. The 2 on the left are for previewing data, and the 2 are on the right here are a bit more interactive. Right, the lower right here is where you're going to do the data quality profiling, just to better understand the content, the structure of the data, right? What kind of data am I dealing with ultimately, right? And the data profiling tool here makes it easy to kind of drill into the data, look at it from different angles, using different data quality metrics. You can see them here. If you follow my mouse here, using these different data quality metrics to better understand the content and the structure of the data. Ultimately, what am I dealing with, right? If you're working with just a few thousand records, and maybe you know the data really well, you might not have so many questions about the content and the structure of the data. But for a lot of folks, we're working with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of records. And we don't necessarily know what to expect. Does a name field, a person name field contain people name data or person name type of data? Does it contain a name at the end of the day? Or does it also contain company names? Or maybe in some cases, phone numbers or email addresses? Data is really a can of worms. So, you almost never know what you're going to get. So the data quality profiling makes it quick, simple, to better understand some of these, data quality challenges at a high level, doing it in bulk without, having to configure the tool or anything along those lines. So we'll look at that. We'll look at that with the example. But from the clean step, that's the lower right here. The upper right, this is where we're going to do the cleansing, the normalization, and the standardization. So if we want to do any cleansing or normalization of the data, that can be done here in the upper right on the clean step. And there's a variety of different ways to cleanse and normalize the data, right? It's very simple. It's point and click, copy and paste, right? So it doesn't require a lot of learning. Different ways to remove characters, strings, patterns, things like that. Convert data, standardize data, split data, merge data. So really a lot of powerful functionality here. We're going to come back to that looking at the examples later. So again, just a 2-minute overview. After clean, we move to match. This is where we match data. We set up the rules to do the matching. So again, we're on the match step, and if you look in the upper left, we've got match configuration, match result, and match report. So from configuration, it's just 3 steps. And for beginners, this is very simple. Step 1, select tables. Step 2, select columns to match. And step 3, create the match definitions. So we just follow it from the left to the right, choose our sources, choose our columns for matching, and then we can kind of configure the way that the matching is going to work here. So for beginners, this is a simple 3-step process. For more advanced users, it is pretty highly configurable if that's what you want to do, right? So that's a basic overview of the software, right? Again, what are we helping to solve? The types of problems: deduplication, data integration, data migration, different types of data processing, data cleansing, data normalization, a variety of different potential use cases out there, list matching, things like that. And it's a very simple workflow. Load data, better understand and clean the data, and then match the data, right? So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So today, again, we're looking very specifically at name matching. And let me take a quick pause here, see if we have any questions coming in. Again, if questions come up throughout the webinar, I really encourage those, and I'll try to keep an eye on the question box here, so feel free. So no questions as of yet. So let's go ahead and import some data here. I'm going to import 2 lists here, and this is a really simple example because when we do any kind of cleansing and matching, we may have very high quality, very complete, consistent, standardized data to work with, or it may not be, right? And it may be more complex, right? Let's start with a simple example here. We're going to move to import data from a couple of different Excel sheets here. And as I do this, I just want to let everyone know that I'm okay to run over the 30-minute mark today. So if anyone wants to kind of hang out here, if you want to drop off at 30 minutes, feel free. If you want to hang out and go a little longer, that's fine too. We might, things might get more interesting towards the end here. I'm going to import some data here, a couple of simple examples, very complete, consistent, standardized, normalized data. And it's going to make it very simple, right? I don't have to do a lot of cleansing. I don't have to do much verification or enrichment or normalization of the data. I don't really have to do much profiling of the data to better understand it. These are simple examples with very minor differences between the data sets here. So if we look at names 1 and names 2, we've got some small differences in the full names, in the names of the people. So Peggy James. On this side, it's Ms. Peggy James, some very minor differences, right? This is easy stuff. Here we've got Bart Dixon. Here we've got Mr. Bart Dixon. If we look at the address here, let's get that out of the way here. If we look at address, it looks pretty good on this side. Looks like pretty much the same address here, maybe just a small difference in the punctuation. If we look at some of the other columns, email and phone, on this side, it looks like more consistently we have the data here, maybe a little different. If we look at the emails in depth here, yeah, so we're missing one on this side, and the email does match there. So this is a simple scenario, right? I don't necessarily have to do a ton of profiling, and just a few records. I don't necessarily have to do a ton of cleansing. I pretty well understand the data. Which is the first part of the challenge. And it looks pretty clean and standardized, so I don't necessarily have to clean it up or standardize it or do any kind of enrichment or verification or anything. So this is really kind of a simple example. And in this type of example, I can just skip to fuzzy matching, right? Fuzzy matching is your hammer in your toolkit, right? I mean, it's one of those things that you always need. you know, it's one of those tools that solves, you know, so many different problems. For some of the other problems, you might need to do some, you know, verification, enrichment. You know, you might need some reference data. You might need to, you know, do some cleanup, some standardization. You know, you might need to profile the data and things like that. But it all depends on the scenario, right? So on matching, we're going to start at configuration. Step 1, select your sources. I've done that. I can see the different sources and the column names here at step 2. I'm just going to go ahead and start by matching on the name field. Now, something like this should be pretty simple. I can adjust my level. Again, it's going to, you know, just by default, it's going to set it up to use our best-in-class fuzzy match algorithm. I might make a small change to fuzzy level, right? There are, you know, other ways to go ahead and, you know, configure the way that the matching is happening, you know, different algorithms, different ways of handling null values or blank values. We have a customizable knowledge-based library. This can be really useful. And lots of tools in the clean step to get better match results. But, you know, again, this is a simple example. So if I choose the right columns and do the right kind of matching and, you know, tell the system to start matching, it's going to go ahead and do this really quickly for me, and I'm probably going to have really quick and accurate results here. And in this case, I do. Right? We've matched on the full name column, you know, just the one column, keeping it simple. We did that at essentially requiring an 85% level of similarity. That was the level back here, the fuzzy level, right? We come over to results here, and we can see that this data has been nicely grouped together, right? Regardless of, you know, the kind of the fragmented, the differences in the way that the data is represented. You know, differences in the names, differences in the addresses, things like that, missing information. We've been able to, you know, really quickly and easily group this data together. But again, we often run into, you know, scenarios that are much more complex, right? The data isn't so complete or consistent or standardized or clean. You know, it isn't as up to date. A lot of the times we're working with legacy data, and you know, the phone numbers could be completely different. The address could be completely different. You know, in addition to all of the other, you know, potential problems that may exist there. So this is just a simple example of how you can quickly and easily, you know, install the software. You know, it's plug and play, minimal training. You know, import some data and do some, you know, fuzzy matching that, you know, in many scenarios is going to work for you right out of the box. And you don't have to be a wizard. You don't have to, you know, put a lot of work into, you know, understanding the data or cleansing or verifying, enriching, things like that. And you can very quickly and easily get the results that you're looking for, right? But again, not all scenarios are going to be so simple, right? So we've got a more complex scenario here, and hopefully this might inspire some questions. So we're going to import 2 other sets of data here. I actually have a few queued up, and we'll see if we get to all sets of data here. I'm going to use more complex examples. I'm going to start with customer and source 2. So more complex example, data is less consistent, standardized, up to date, things like that. But just 2 of these 4 sources, right? So we don't jump right into ultra complex right away. So I've got a customer source of data and a source 2. And again, you know, if we start just by kind of understanding the data, right? This is the first time you guys are seeing this data. It's important to kind of understand what we're dealing with. Customer data, we've got Peggy, James, 2 different columns, Peggy, Bart, James Dixon. Here we've got Margaret and James Madison. Now, this is the same person, right? So the level of complexity that we're talking about here is very, very common. It's nicknames, right? Ben doesn't always appear as Ben. The name Ben doesn't always appear as Ben. It also appears as Benjamin. Peggy appears as Margaret. Bart appears as Bartholomew, right? And this is one of the many challenges when dealing with name data, right? People data, right? So it's just a single example of many, right? And you know, we have solutions for this, right? So it's a single example, kind of going layer by layer to make this easier to digest, hopefully. If you look at the names, we've got, James on this side, but maybe a little more up to date, maybe less up to date. Looks like kind of a married maiden name scenario on this side, right? So another level of complexity here. If we look at the email, we've got peggy.james@gmail.com. And on this side, it's an Outlook address, right? So a lot of the times we're dealing with multiple versions of the truth, right? Or we're dealing with, different sets of data that just contain different, pieces of information, right? Most scenarios are not as straightforward as the one that we started with. Sometimes they are, and that's a good way to start. It's just by doing some fuzzy matching. But a lot of the times when you look at the details of the data that you're matching, you're going to find some of these other scenarios. Nicknames, spelling differences, incomplete information, less standardized information, different formats and things like that. And all of these things make it a bit more difficult to do that matching. Some other differences here. If we look at phone, we've got dots here, 222-2020. Take a look at this side. It looks like we've got dashes instead of dots, right? So, again, from the clean step, we can use the profiling to, if we're looking at thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of records, we're not going to necessarily want to do, the type of eyeballing that we're doing here, right? It just doesn't necessarily make sense. Maybe some eyeballing, but you're obviously not going to be able to understand all of the different issues that exist there. Again, you might have an email address in a name field, for example. You might have tens of thousands of records that contain email addresses in the name field, right? That's something you'd want to know going into this. So again, you can use the data quality profiling to pick, to easily kind of zoom in to identify these issues before you do some matching, right? Or after you do some matching. So here with the data quality profiling, you can see source by source, just flip between sources, source by source, and column by column, what type of data you're dealing with. You can find some of these problems. What type of data? What percentage is filled? What percentage is empty? How many distinct values are there in that column? How many, these values contain trailing spaces or commas or dots or hyphens? So talking about the phone, we can easily see on this side, well, it looks like all of our phone numbers contain hyphens. We compare that to this side, and we don't have any hyphens in that phone field, right? So we already know there's going to be an issue there if we're trying to match on a phone number, for example, right? We make it easy to kind of identify these issues. Here, we can see that phones contain dots, right? And so maybe we just go ahead and remove those, right? Quick example, what might you do about this? On this side, software says, look, if you want to remove dots from the phone field, it highlights that for us. We can remove that, run clean, and now we're just working with numbers, right? Same thing on this side, to again, make the data more consistent, to standardize the data. On this side, it says, hey, look, if you want to take a look at hyphens in the phone number field, it highlights it up top. If you want to remove those, go ahead and do it with a checkbox here. Very simple to use. Now, again, we're working with a phone number. Now matching becomes much easier, right? We can move to the match here, choose our sources, go find that phone field. We can run an exact match on this. We don't necessarily need a fuzzy. And we're probably going to get pretty good results because we've essentially eliminated one of the problems, one of the formatting differences between these two different files, right? So let me pause there and take a look and see if we have any questions coming in. Again, we can't go from 0 to 60 and just jump right into super advanced scenarios. So hopefully, all of this is logical and we're progressing in a way that everyone can kind of keep up with and, hopefully inspiring some questions along the way. Let's take a look here. So one of the questions that I see here is about nicknames. What's the best way to deal with nicknames? So, that's a really good question. And, with data, there really is a silver bullet, a single solution that solves everything. But for nicknames, we do have some tools out of the box for that. And I can give you some tips for that, right? So if we look at configuration here, match configuration, you're going to see our knowledge base library. This is a customizable knowledge base library at the enterprise level. It becomes customizable at the enterprise level, right? There's a workaround for that at some of the small business levels. Feel free to reach out, but huge value here. So it's available to everyone with the software out of the box at any level of the software, small business, enterprise, but it does become customizable at the enterprise level. You can see here contact names. So this is a knowledge base. It's a reference set of data that's built to handle address parts and company types and contact names, among other things. And at the enterprise level, you can view that up top here under Match, Knowledge Base Library Manager. You can see your contact names, and we've set this up to work with nicknames. We've set this up. It's already built out for you, and then again, you can add to it and customize it at the enterprise level. We've set this up to help you with nicknames. That way, Margaret rolls up to Peggy, or vice versa, and Bart rolls up to Bartholomew, and vice versa, things like that. So this is a nickname library, or knowledge base, so to speak. It's a reference data set here that is going to help you with those nicknames. So that's one way. There are some other ways. Let's take a look to see if we have other questions coming in here. Yeah, we've got another question here. Again, I'm happy to run over maybe 10 or 15 minutes if anybody wants to hang with me here and ask them additional questions. Other question that I see here, how many files can you load at once? Are there any limits on the number of records? Yeah, great question. And that's going to depend on the specific edition of the software. So we have a couple of small business editions, and we have an enterprise edition. We have enterprise for desktop and for server. So feel free to get in touch. We've got some of that information on the website to help you understand those limitations. The enterprise edition doesn't have any imposed limits, so you can import data from dozens, hundreds of different sources if you want to. There aren't any imposed limitations on the number of sources or the number of records. The small business editions do have some limitations there. It's a good question. I appreciate that. Got another question coming in here. Let me expand this one. Can you show an example for XML and JSON format? Feel free to get in touch. So the question is, can you show an example for XML and JSON format? If you look back here on the data step, you might have noticed this earlier, but you can see XML and JSON. I don't know if I have any JSON or XML formats kind of queued up and ready to go in demo mode, so to speak, dummy data that I can share with you right now. But it should be really simple for you. If you have any questions about how to do that, or if you want to get in touch, feel free. But yeah, absolutely, you can work with those formats there. So again, this scenario here, something like cleaning up the phone number, might be simple enough to, solve the problem. And that way we match the data and we're ready to go. But, let's take it a step further. And, what if that didn't work, right? And here we've got a scenario where, the phone numbers are different and, the emails are different. And, we need to work with the data that we have, right? So we're looking at first names and last names, right? Well, here I would probably use a nickname library, like we talked about from the match step. If you look at configuration, again, that knowledge base library, I do that for nicknames. And that's to solve the challenges that we have here on the first name. And then I'd also probably do like some splitting or parsing on the last name here. So again, a fuzzy match on something like this is going to work real well. Actually, let me open up the question box here. A fuzzy match on something like this is going to work well, but it's not necessarily going to be a silver bullet. It's not necessarily always going to be enough, which is why we have, profiling to better understand what you're dealing with. When we talk about name structure, for example, we've got, in the US, the name structure or format is typically first name followed by middle name followed by last name. But, different cultures, different parts of the world, have different name structures. So, in some cultures, especially a Latin American culture, for example, you might have 2 first names and 2 last names, for example. So it can be really useful to better understand the content and the structure of the data, just because all of the different possibilities with data, right? So for this, if we've got different email addresses and different phone numbers, and we have to work with names, well, I'm probably also going to use the nickname knowledge base. I might even do some splitting on the last name to be able to catch those. With email addresses like this, I can also easily split email addresses in the clean step here, and I can split this out so that instead of matching on an entire email address, I can match just the first part, which is the user, which a lot of the times is very similar. Might not be the exact same, but a lot of the times you're going to see some similarity there. So at the clean step, I can quickly and easily split out the email address to be able to do some matching with just the user part of the email address. If we look here, we've got Peggy.James compared to this side, and it's just, it's very, very similar, Peggy James, right? The biggest difference here is really the domain, right? So again, just a few examples here of, when profiling and cleansing is going to be different or is going to be useful for you, and some of the different, ways that we can use these tools working with people data, right? It's all very domain-specific stuff. Again, talk about data. We've got, in many cases, companies capturing, terabytes of data daily. In many cases from all over the world, different languages, different structures, different levels of completeness and how up to date it is and things like that, different data quality issues. We've got party type of data where we've got people, customers, contacts, prospects, employees, company data, vendors, customers, prospects, competitors. We've got places like addresses, geocodes and things like that. So a lot of different, potential scenarios here. And when we're talking about data matching or any other way of working with data, it's all very domain specific. So that's why we're holding this very specifically today on name matching here. So let's take a look. If I don't see any other questions coming up here. Yeah, I don't see any other questions here. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look here at some of the things that we just talked about. So 2 different sources here. How would I split this email address? Well, from the split step on email, we can easily split the email, right? Very, very simple to use. You just need to know where to find it, right? You need to know how to handle this scenario, what you want to do, and where to find that functionality here. Scroll over, and we can see how that has been split for us, right? Now we've removed what we would consider noise, and we can use just this part to do the matching, right? We can do that on both sides. So again, split, email, and email, run, and we're just going to split that out, right? Very point and click, very simple to use. Now from the match step, let's go ahead and just refresh this. Now we have that to work with, and we can leave it as a fuzzy match, because a lot of the times there are some differences there. And again, we're able to get the groups that we're looking for. If we follow this over, we're able to see where we did that matching. Right? So just a small difference in that user part of the email address, and we're able to find some additional matches that way, right? So let's jump back here. The other one was doing splitting. We talked about doing potentially, so we looked at the phone number and how we could potentially clean that up. We also talked about like splitting here, or even doing some, fuzzy matching, things like that. We talked about doing the knowledge base library for the first name. Let's go ahead and look at the knowledge base library for this. I think that'll be useful for everyone on the call here. So again, configuration And let's get rid of this. And let's move back to first name and last name. And again, knowledge-based library. So this becomes really, really powerful at the enterprise level where we can customize this. So we know that essentially we're working with Bartholomew, which is Bart, and we're working with Peggy and Margaret, right? So here we can go ahead and we can look for those, or we can do some searching up top here. We can go ahead and do some sorting, filtering, things like that. Or we can just go ahead and add what we need here. So I would say Bartholomew. I want that to roll up to Bart. And I'm just going to add that. And then again, Margaret. I want that to roll up to Peggy, I believe it was. I'm just going to go ahead and add that. Adding that to our customizable knowledge-based library. Go ahead and close this. Now it's going to treat those values as if they were exact matches, right? I'm going to go ahead and start matching. And let's take a look here. Now we didn't see them. And I think I might need to reduce the last name here, because we do have that last name that was pretty different in those scenarios. So let's try it again with a reduced level there. Yeah, let's take a look. Oh, you know what? I need to go ahead and actually apply it if I'm going to use it to go. It's a really good question. So I'm gonna try to give you a quick answer to this question. And it's not a silver bullet type of solution. I mean, reach out to me, let's have a conversation. But what I would tell you is if you've got something like that, and this is the scenario where you've got two different tables, and the scenario here is I've got a first name and last name here, but I've got another first name and last name here, and I need to match first name and last name against a single first name and last name combination here. But I also want to use the secondary first name and last name here and match it to the same group here. Same thing with addresses. So the example here with addresses, and hopefully this will be easier to visualize. In some cases, you might have a single source with a single address and another source where you have both a billing and a shipping address, for example, right? And you want to match the billing and the shipping address to a single address from that other source, right? So that's the way that I'm understanding this question. It's a very common question. And in that scenario, one way to do that is to, where you do have just one address, go ahead and copy that address here. So for example, if it's a first name and last name, for example, or let's just stick with that example. Go ahead and copy that, those columns here. Copy, okay, it's very simple to do. You can see those now at the end. Now I can match what was just a single pair of name columns on the one side. I can match the two pairs of name columns on this side to the two on this side, right? So if this is, just a single customer address, and on the other side I have a billing customer address and a shipping address, now I'll be able to match it, essentially map it and then match it. I'll have two here and two here, right? So it might be a bit difficult to visualize. It's a more advanced question, not something that everyone can necessarily visualize. Next question here, how accurate is your fuzzy matching? Can you do phonetic matching? Great question, I really appreciate it. So again, WinPure was founded in 2003. We've been doing fuzzy matching, name matching, product matching, address matching, company matching, asset matching, things like that for many, many years. The algorithm is proprietary. It's something that we've been developing and improving upon over the years. I can say with great certainty, it's going to be faster and more accurate than any other algorithm that you might be able to work with. I've personally worked with and seen results from a variety of other algorithms out there. You've got these types of algorithms available in IBM solutions, maybe even Talon, SQL. A lot of the times it is phonetic matching. Phonetic matching is not known to be very accurate, not nearly as accurate as the Gerald Winkler variations of the fuzzy matching algorithms. there's different variations of the fuzzy matching algorithms. The Gerald-Winkler set of algorithms are known to be the most effective for a variety of different data sets. It also depends on what type of data you're working with. But Gerald-Winkler and the fuzzy is normally known to be the most effective, far more effective than a fuzzy, than a phonetic type of algorithm. So very fast, very, very accurate. You know, feel free to do some testing of your own, but I've been doing this for years, and it's probably the fastest and the most accurate that you'll find in the market. We don't do phonetic matching. That can be done using the knowledge base library. Essentially, it's the same thing. It's kind of the same way that the algorithm works when it does phonetic matching. So it is something that you can do. And in the very near future, we're going to be adding to the types of algorithms that we have available in the software. I wouldn't normally recommend phonetic matching. It's much slower, and it's not nearly as comprehensive or as effective. But typically, you're going to get much better results with some of the other tools, including the fuzzy matching. But good question there. So doing a quick time check and taking a look here. I don't see any other questions coming in, so want to leave it there for today. Again, I really hope this was helpful. Appreciate your interest, your time, your consideration. If you have something you'd like to discuss in more detail, feel free to schedule some time on my calendar. Feel free just to respond to the email if you have like a one-off question or a suggestion about the webinars. But thank you again, everyone, for joining today. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep your eye out for coming weeks when we're going to host Ask the Expert series, which is really kind of open forum for questions, and also going to look at some other domain-specific matching scenarios, so matching company names, matching addresses. So thank you again, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. Appreciate your time.